Hey, so today I thought I would do a short review of the film Häxan, A Study of Witchcraft Through the Ages. It's a Swedish-Danish silent film made in 1922 by Benjamin Christensen, which, as the title suggests, begins as a look at the phenomena of witchcraft. However, by the end of the film it turns into an examination of how the very old and the very young, particularly women, and those with certain forms of mental illness were seen from what are now referred to as the burning times through to the 1920s. Shot in the style of a docudrama, Häxan provides an interesting look at how the vulnerable, mainly the old, the infirm, the innocent, and the less fortunate, have been treated throughout history, essentially demonized, pitied, and/or excluded, depending on their social status. The fact that it was the church in control hundreds of years ago and that the medical profession were doing this in the 1920s shows how things changed. Apothecaries may well have been burned at the stake, while hundreds of years later, doctors would be given the keys to the kingdom. While there was a decline in the extremity of so-called Christianity between those times, ideologically speaking, the Inquisition were, arguably, no more a Christian organization than the doctors were, though they were certainly seen as one at the time, given that they were members of the church, which highlights the differences between the behavior of the church and the tenets of Christianity. The fear of the witch and the devil were replaced over time by a fear of illness and embarrassment connected with having a family member who was ill. Society dealt with these concerns, first through the sadism of physical torture and death, and then later by the revocation of one's liberty for often spurious medical reasons, but both in their day were seen as equally moral by many in society. Watching Häxan makes me think of how such matters are dealt with now in the 21st century. The differences between people of different sexes and genders, as well as ethnicities and socio-economic backgrounds, are spoken about with great eloquence by others, and I do not seek to add to, or indeed detract from, that argument. In terms of how the very young, the very old, the poor, the mentally infirm, and the otherwise vulnerable are treated, institutions such as the asylums of past centuries are frowned upon, and the idea of hospitalizing or killing people that can be seen by some as innocent or burdensome is rightly condemned by society today. However, it does make me wonder what will happen in another 100 years, or maybe 200, or even longer into the future. Will people look back and condemn us in turn for drugging people for many of the same reasons that we once burned them or put them in hospitals? While the hospital is, of course, an advancement over the torch, and medication can be seen as an advancement over the asylum system of past days, the fear of other people for our differences is still rife in society. Whether future generations will condemn us as we now condemn those who burned people alive or confined their relatives in hospital is not certain. But Häxan shows us once again that objective morality is often relative to time and place, and that this was intellectualized and depicted on film from the early days of silent movies. Thus, I consider Häxan to be an important social document made by a director who was ahead of his time, and one that is still worth experiencing nearly a century later.